Welcome into the Pursuit of Manliness podcast, where we are vigorously equipping men to pursue biblical manliness. My name is Jarrett Samuels. I'm the host of the podcast. As always, I'd like to begin by thanking you for checking out today's show. Whether you're a longtime subscriber, appreciate you guys, or maybe this is your first time here, you got tagged in something, or someone shared the show, or you noticed it somewhere and you said, hey, all right, I'll check that out. I want you to know, this whole pursuit of manliness thing is a whole lot bigger than some silverback sitting behind a microphone just talking at you or having some people on to talk. It's much bigger than a podcast. You know, we talk about community all the time. We talk about tribe. We got Pursue Wilderness, which has like a weekly devotional that you can use in the wilderness. Campfire conversations or Friday night fire pit, easy for me to say, conversations. 30-mile challenge. Pursue Marriage, where my wife and I are trying to, have some conversations with people. We've done a few things in the last handful of years, and just feel like maybe the Lord's opening that door to kind of pursue that a little bit. And so if you go to the website, you're going to see it's much bigger than a podcast. There's a lot of moving pieces. Tribe has 6-month reading plans, daily reading, weekly reading, 20, 30, I don't know how many Zoom calls, a session, marriage calls, 26, 25 challenge videos. So there's a lot here besides just some guy in a room with a microphone. So I want you to check that out. I also want you to check out the link in the show notes to Joe and Mell Hashey. I really appreciate them being on the show. I think there's just a great validity when you talk marriage or parenting if the wife is willing to be on the show. And especially with the type of ministry and the things that they're doing, it just makes sense. And we're talking about 7 elements to establish a strong family. These elements may not all work for you, or you might find 1 or 2 that really stand out. But I do believe if you at least consider these 7 things, and no, they're not in the show notes, you'll have to listen to get them, you'll realize there's probably a few things that you could consider if you have a spouse and kids, or if you want to have a spouse and kids someday, or if you're trying to help people who have a spouse and kids. Maybe there's some things that you can take from this. And obviously with their background, some of the things they've walked through, some of this stuff, the verbiage might be different for you. But the point would be the same, to kind of work through, routines and conversations as a family. And that's something that, man, I've had to learn the hard way of just realizing your kids have hard days too. You think, oh, I worked hard on it. They had hard days too. They've taken it on the chin too. So just being mindful of that. And I do want to wrap up with this before we meet Joe and Mell. If you're in the herd, you will not hear me say at the end, for the herd bonus content is me. You get more of me. I have something different that I want to share with you in addition to what we just talked about here. Some resources that have been important to me or made an impact on me. Joe and Mell did me a favor, and I think I did them a favor. We had a weird scheduling window, and we just said, this will work, but it only works for like 30 minutes. Typically, when I get someone on the show, I say, I need 30 minutes for podcast. I need 10 to 15 for the herd. And they're like, absolutely. That didn't work for them, and it was really tight for me because I was leaving for something else afterwards. They will probably be on the show again at some point, or at least record a portion for the herd. They offer that. I wasn't cornering them. Hey, you owe me. Nope, none of those things. However, they were kind enough to offer that, and we'll probably figure it out at some point. So you know what? That's enough of me. Let's meet Joe and Mell. Let's pray. God, I thank you for today. I thank you for Joe and Mell. I thank you for their family. I thank you for what you've laid on their heart and what you're doing in them and through them. And as we pray often, we're thankful for the gift of technology, but I'm thankful for those who will listen to this episode, the men, but also the women who are going to hear this. And God, that it will stir something in them, fresh, new. Your timing is always perfect. And we're just trusting you in that. I pray for those who might be walking the dog or in their truck or wherever they're at, God, that it would just, you would be tilling up the soil of their heart for the seeds that are planted to take root and do what only you can do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, at this time, I want to welcome Joe and Mell Hashey to the podcast. Thank you both for being on the show today.
Absolutely our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to get out of the way the best I can. But what I want to do is want you guys just kind of introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then I want to get into what your areas of focus is for your ministry.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick rundown, try to fit our story in 2 or 3 minutes here and then get to the content. Mell and I were from upstate New York. She was a social worker. I was a public school economics and U.S. history teacher. And our life took a different path. My father passed, and I decided to start a little gym in my basement because he had a lot of health issues that were preventable, and he didn't address those in his lifetime. And so I wanted to help adults live longer and healthier lives. So fast forward a few years, that takes off, and we get 2, 3, 4 locations up and running, and we're serving 800 plus adults. I left teaching at that point. Mel comes on to run finance and HR for the company. We're humming along, and then 2020 happened, where all the gyms were closed for a significant amount of time in New York State. And we had rental properties. We were living below our means and buying some rental properties like we were told as assets. And they put a rent moratorium on. So everyone stops paying rent. And we have these 5, 6 mortgages. We have a staff of employees to pay, and are in an area that aren't aligned with our family's values. Our kids are home for over a year. They're did extended home education in New York, and it wasn't the right fit for our oldest son specifically. We have 3 boys, and the middle one would have been fine learning online, but the older one didn't have the capacity for it. And so Mel and I would go for long walks during this time, let all our frustrations out, talk, get on the same page. And we decided to look at a map and find a place that aligns with our family's core values more. We picked a spot. We flew out, bought a house, set up a leadership team so the company could still run and serve the adults. And we moved to a small town in Colorado on the side of a mountain. And our kids got more into outdoor education. They were back to school fast. And we sold all of our long-term rentals. We pivoted to short-term rentals, and so that we could avoid the rent moratorium issues, reinvested things, reestablished our values, and moved to a town 2,000 miles away where we knew nobody and started fresh.
You agree with that, Mel?
I do very much. And one thing that he left out was the year that we were moving. This wasn't like a smooth, easy decision to make. I mean, Joe's like a big picture thinker. So we were on one of these walks and he mentions like, hey, what's our lifeboat plan? What are we going to do? And what if we moved? And I just thought that was crazy. Our family's here. Everything we know is here. This is essentially our comfort zone. And I was homeschooling that year because kids were only allowed to go a day a week. And like Joe mentioned, that wasn't going to work for us. So, but once we opened up our minds to the idea, the opportunities just started to blossom. And you couldn't deny that there was something out there that we could pursue that was exciting. So it really took, the shift happened pretty quickly to make the decision, but then it was more of like a one step at a time. We're homeschooling, trying to sell our house. We had to move into my in-laws for a couple months before actually moving across the country. So it was a long, difficult process, but we are definitely reaping the benefits now.
I love that because we talk about that. There are no rules to how to do life, how to do family. We kind of think, well, I got to send my kids here. I live here. No, that's not it at all. And I think what you guys just did, we talked to our kids about this. We've moved a few times. And I think when you move and you don't know anyone else, it can make or break you. And if you do family well, you will be so much stronger than when you had everything that was very familiar to you. That's why I love your story. Through the course of this, you've come up with these elements to establishing a strong family, and we'll touch on a few of them. The first is your core values. How did you start to kind of refine that and define what those values are?
Yeah, so I came from the business world. We were running these gyms. I started to get an itch to learn more about business. I travel the country and visit any business I respected and would open the doors to me. I'd go in and observe them for the day, learn from them, and they always had these things called core values. And some companies live by them, and some they just put on the wall and didn't pay attention to them. And so we kind of took that note and said, hey, what does our family actually stand for? There are lots of values out there, and there's a lot of good values out there, but what are the core ones that we need to instill in our kids? Because if everything's good and kind of this lukewarm middle, it's tough to establish what we actually stand for. And so we went through a process. I learned a business called Kill, Keep, or Combine. Mel and I listed everything, that all these values that we thought were good to great. And then we sat down and we would look at them back and forth and say, all right, well, this one is a good value, but it's not core. Let's kill that one off the list. And we'd cross it off. And then the ones that were essential, all right, let's keep this and discuss this a little later. And then we combine the ones, like if she had gratitude and I had thankfulness, like, okay, those are close enough. Let's align those to something that's important and let's combine it. And we worked through our list and established, the goal is 3 to 7, because you want to be able to have a small amount that you can actually remember, because what is memorable is portable, and you want your kids to carry around these values in their mind. So if you have a list of 15, they'll remember 0. If you have 3, they'll remember it. So less is more with this, because you want them to remember. If you have older kids, you can have them involved in the process. This isn't something you need to do right away. But even if you don't have kids and are thinking about it, like, establish what you stand for now, and your decision-making process will be so much more clear in how you guide and lead your family. We use them as a frame when decisions come up, like major decisions. Do they align with our core values or not? And that makes the decision so much easier for us.
And that was like the first step, was establishing what they are. And our kids were little, like Joe mentioned. So we handled that process. But then the implementation was super important. So I like visuals. I created little bookmarks and I had it on the kitchen table. And every night at dinner, we would review one. And we would just keep talking about it at dinner. So the kids eventually absorbed this idea. And we still have one of the bookmarks. It's been years now, but the kids know the values. At our family meetings, we discuss how we've embodied a value that week. So it's constantly in our conversation. It just becomes part of the family vocabulary. So establishing them is like step one, but then you have to like continuously integrate them into family living.
Yeah, we say if everything matters, then nothing does. So if everything is a vital, you're like, then okay, everything can't be an emotion, everything can't be a reaction, or you're just the whole family's exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the hardest things is it's easy to sit around dinner time. Not easy. It is easier at dinner time to kind of talk through these things, or at night before we go to bed. We do family devotions, or whatever. That morning though, you talk about establishing a morning routine. That's when it all starts again. So what does that look like for you guys?
So our morning routine, really the purpose of it is that the kids wake up and have purpose and contribute to the family system. So we don't want them to just roll out of bed and feel like there's nothing to do. So our kids get up, do a quick little workout.
Well, I want to
Oh,
back up just a little bit, Mel. Sorry for cutting you off. We had an issue with the family, what we discussed during our family meetings, that the kids would roll out, kind of sleep in their eyes. They'd come up with like their stuffed animals. They'd sit on the couch, and like, you can't start the day with that level of energy. We got to start off on the right path. So then we established the morning routines, because I know a lot of people can feel that, where the kids wake up and they don't want to do anything. And so we had to establish something to get them up moving and give them a purpose for their own sake too.
right. So we do a quick 5-minute workout, and that's more to establish a habit for them as they get older. And then everybody has their contribution in the kitchen. So we choose to not call it a chore, because chore just historically has like a negative connotation. So everyone contributes, everyone brings value. Even if it's my 5-year-old opens the freezer door so the older kids can put the ice trays in it. So everyone has something to contribute. And after that, they do a journal. So they write down 3 things they're thankful for, some goals for the day. And then if there's time remaining, they can, use tech or do something else of their choosing. But right now it's just a smooth like chaos in the kitchen. Everybody's getting their thing done. Everybody knows, and they really see themselves as assets to the family. And they just start off the morning with a purpose.
Smooth chaos. That's a podcast title, right? That's a t-shirt. You guys brand that. That's yours. I know when my kids were young and I tried to do devotions or try to have a conversation, and they would be squirrely and whatever, and they would just aggravate me. Forget it. We're not going to do it. We're just, you're not paying attention, or what. You guys talk about having family discussions that kids love. What's the secret sauce to this, that you can have a meaningful dialogue that is age appropriate as well?
So a portion of our family meeting is discussion topics. And this is really where anybody in the family, us as parents or the kids, can bring something they want to discuss and a problem they want to solve. So we have a weekly family meeting. We don't want family meetings to be this thing that only happens when something terrible is going to be announced. It's a consistent weekly thing. We do it during dinner on Saturday. So we just kind of habit stack. We're already having dinner together. Let's just, integrate it with our family meeting. And the kids really love this because they are a part of this highly functioning meeting, highly functioning system where we'll present a problem and we might define what success looks like. So if we notice they're not getting their 15 minutes a day of reading done, what success looks like is that you guys are going to read every day. How are we going to make that happen? And we put it out to the kids to come up with the solution. So they get to bring their ideas. And honestly, 95% of the time, we just go with what they came up with, because usually it's pretty good. And then we try it on for size for a week. And if it's not working, we go back to the drawing board the next week. But they like that they're heard, that their opinions are valued, they're learning problem solving skills, communication skills. as we bounce ideas around. And even the 5-year-old, he might not necessarily be as involved in the discussion, but he's in the room, he's hanging out. We give him little tasks to do, so he feels like he's part of this organization as well.
Yeah, to your point earlier, like he kind of hovers around. Sometimes he'll play with his toys on the side. It's not like the engagement that I like desire. However, we hold the standard, we do the meeting, and he soaks in more than we can imagine when he's sitting there playing with his cars. Like he's kind of listening, and then he'll like chip in a little bit. And so we lowered our expectation on like sitting up straight and having a book on your head type of school meeting. It's, hey, we're going to have this meeting. We're going to do it well as a high performing team. If you're not ready to be a part of that team, then you can sit on the side. And they feel almost like, oh, well, you know what? I do want to be a part of the team. I thought I was going to act out, and then everyone would stop. Like, no, we're still going to do what we came here to do. And then they integrate themselves.
I think that's vital. You raise the standard for the kids in your family, but the same token, you allow them to be kids in your family. You know, they're not they're not employees. They're young. They're developing into young men and women, and so allowing them to see. And I think there's a great value to being younger to be able to watch the older. You know, they're going to mimic that at some point. One of the things that you guys have drilled into, and this is so hard. We get it right sometimes this season of life, not so much. Dinner time. So what does that look like for you guys? There's such value in doing that. The conversations you have intentionality with your dinners. How often is it every night? And what does that look like?
Yeah, first I have a confession to make. This came out of a deficit I had earlier. I was a little bit of a workaholic because I would teach high school and run the gym at the same time for many years. So I'd run a training session 6 to 7. I'd go to teach class 7:20 until 2:50, and then I'd be back at the gym by 3 until 7 was when I had my last clients, and I'd work out, and then I would come home, and I would do that for years. Because I thought my version is like, well, I want to be a provider for the family. And while that is true, we were out of balance. And so when we moved, we had to reestablish like, all right, this is an important time for us to all connect.
Right. I think there's a couple things that are important about the family dinners, and our goal is to have them every night. Now, 2 of our kids are in sports right now, so that's not always happening, but we still piece it together as best as we can. Even if I already ate earlier, the kids are home at 7:30, I still sit down with them. So what it really creates is a time that's expected that we're going to be together. So if mom and dad are working or home, and then you guys are at school, you can look forward to reconnecting at this time at dinner. I think that's really the goal, is to have a time to connect, even if it's just for 10 minutes for a quick sandwich or something like that. And it also it gives the opportunity to see what the day was like for the kids, to kind of gauge where they're at. Sometimes it's a very silly conversation, sometimes it's more serious, but it's really that expectation of, hey, whatever happens, I'm going to get to reconnect with my family. I mean, I grew up where family dinners were basically you ate and watched the news. So we make sure that there really wasn't conversation, and I didn't know it, but I feel like I was starved for that conversation. So we don't have a TV in there. We just hang out, chat, whatever the case may be. But it's an opportunity to connect and bond.
So we got 3 kids going 3 different directions. 0 of them are driving. So we're the Uber for all this stuff.
That's where we're at too.
This is some. I know their schedule better than they do. So what do you do then if one of them is at something, you got 2 home? Is there a family, like do you do it like sit down with each one as they come home? Like that's something we've wrestled with. Okay, one of them's working, one of them's at soccer. What do? Do you just make the best with what you have, or do you wait till everyone's home together?
Yeah, 2 different approaches we have. Number one is, yes, we do the best with what we have some of the days, like you're mentioning. The other one, we're super flexible on the time. So I remember when I was growing up, it's like dinner is either 5:30 or like 6. Like you got that window, and if you don't eat in that window, you're gonna evaporate. So like we'll have dinner somewhere between 3 and 7:30. Like what matters isn't the food; it's the communal time together. And so, yes, they can make themselves a little something if it's later, or they can have something a little later if it's earlier. Like we empower them to kind of be in control of their bodies and their hunger. However, we do want that time together, and so we'll be super flexible with the time that it is.
And really, if the focus is on being together, then I pick my kindergartner up at 2:50. So I pick him up, and then for that hour before we go pick up from practice, I spend it with him. I make an intentional decision to, make him a snack, read him a book, hang out with him. And my other son comes out of school and I quickly can see him and I give him a quick hug, wish him luck for practice or the game. So I look for windows of opportunity, even if it's 10 seconds, to just connect with my kid. And then my littlest one and I will look for Henry on the bus because he's like taking the bus down to the middle school for practice. And we just really try to find him and say hi to him. So it's just finding those little areas of opportunity, even if they're a quick hug, just to reconnect with your kids.
With that approach, I think it removes something that's so destructive in all of us. Mom and dad guilt. We all have it. We all have that. You talk about, I'm the same way, working way too much, the whole deal. I'll never get that time back. And, guilt is just constant. There's just one of the things you guys have, and I think this is so vital. This might be my favorite thing on the list, is evening debrief for kids to be heard. They should be heard. They should get a voice. They should add to the conversation. Yes, I'm your parent and all those things. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's just strengthening the relationship. What does that look like?
Sure. So this is kind of something that happened organically. I would go downstairs to put them to bed. I put my 5-year-old to bed and then I go and do a little prayer with my older two. And I noticed that at bedtime, when they're all cozy already and they've showered and they're like ready for bed, that's when they bring up those difficult, sensitive topics from the day. So I noticed this is another one of those windows of opportunity where all I want to do is go to bed. The day is done. It's been a long day. You're running around from practice, picking up this kid, and it's already 9 o'clock. But if you don't spend the time with the kids then to hear them out, whatever the problem they're having might be, you're going to lose that. Because if you're like, hey, let's hold off and deal with that tomorrow, they're probably not going to bring it up. It's one of those in the moment things. And this comes from therapy. I was a therapist for 5 years, and you discuss whatever with the client. The last 5 minutes of the session, that's when they finally feel comfortable to dive into the tough stuff. So it's really an intentional decision that I'm going to give my kids this half an hour. Some days it's 5 minutes, some days it's 30 minutes, but I'm going to make sure I am there with them and that I hear them. Because if I'm not, I'm going to lose that opportunity. And my middle schooler will sometimes not want to say as much, but my 6th grader now, I guess that's middle school as well, he'll just delve into like whatever happened at recess. And I might just want to like jump in and solve the problem, but he just needs to be heard and validated. And then if I can gently push him towards problem solving, that's great. But I think the main point here is that if you're tired and you just give in to your, basically selfish need to just be done with the day, you're going to lose out on a really important opportunity to connect with your kids. And as our kids get older, things are going to come up. And are they going to come to me if they don't see that I'm available? Probably not.
One of the things when they were younger, I just saw it as you're just trying to delay going to bed. You're just trying to stay up.
That's true.
But golly, I look back and think all the times now I had an instance where I used to wrestle with my son. I was trying to, we're going, and he said one day something to the effect of, because you're mad or something. Like he took that as I was mad at him because I was, angry. I thought, man, that was never my intent. That was never my intent. But you don't get to decide how they filter that interaction. And so if we can nurture it, and I'm not a good nurturer, but if I can at least be present, you're talking about cultivating a relationship that will hopefully go with them forever, as long as you're here on this planet.
Exactly. One of our core values is wanting to be together. So, and not just like living under the same roof, we actually care to be together as a family, have fun together. And when the kids eventually move out and have their own life, we want them to still be connected to us. And I see all these opportunities throughout the day, whether it's the morning routine, the family dinner, the family meeting, the evening debrief, we're putting deposits into this relationship with our kids. Like we're investing in it over time.
Yeah. If you don't cultivate it, you have nothing to harvest. So if you got nothing, that's what you work for. But
right.
One of them I'm really curious about. I have a feeling where home relationships to be mindful of. Explain this to me.
Yeah, and it goes back to a little bit what you're saying with parent guilt. Yeah, I have to. Number one, we are open with the kids. Like you are an outcome of our love together as a couple. We don't exist to serve you. Like we're here to nurture and guide you. And so we have that conversation, but there are so many relationships in the house. It's between a husband and wife. It's between me and each one of the children. It's between Mel and each one of the children. And it's the relationships between each one of the kids and themselves. If something feels off, it's good to evaluate. Like, are they having strife between a sibling? Is something on their mind? Like with the wrestling example, is there something on their mind that they're not saying quite yet? Like, is there a relationship time where I need to take my older son on a walk for him to feel comfortable with telling me something that he's feeling? Is our relationship as a husband and a wife, are we getting enough time together? People are big on date nights. We're flexible with it. We get up early. We'll have a little coffee together, so we have some time together in the morning. We'll usually go on date walks or hikes because we're out here in Colorado, and just is more efficient for us than to try to get childcare to go out to dinner and then get expensive meal and come back. It's too stressful. Let's just go for a walk together and hang out. And so just being mindful that those things are happening is important, because like we'll have a child home sick for a week, and then at the end of the week we're like, hey, something's a little off. You know what, we haven't been able to walk together all week. Let's make sure we're intentional about that next week.
Yeah, we tell people we had date nights where we're sitting out in the garage at night drinking coffee with a citronella candle to keep the bugs away. It's free.
That sounds like a good time. I like it.
And I didn't have to get a babysitter, and we didn't have to leave, and the kids know if they really needed something. But it's about intentionality, and everything you're talking about here is living with intentionality. What do you talk to our people here, man? What do you tell them if they're feeling like their house is, what did you say, smooth chaos or whatever, or maybe they just got some of that guilt? Where do you start?
I love starting with clarity, and that is taking the time to unemotionally explain the situation clearly so that they have the opportunity to understand it. If we feel emotions are high, we just say, all right, let's talk about this during the family meeting. That's kind of a time where we can relax and get to the root of it, instead of like snap at them. Hey, I told you to turn that off. Like, hey, I can see you're using too much tech time based on what we discussed. Let's bring it up during the family meeting so it doesn't become this headbutting thing. That's when they become more receptive of hearing like, hey, I haven't had enough time this week to go walk with your mother because we've had one of you home sick. We're gonna take 45 minutes. Can you guys manage yourselves for these 45 minutes? And just tell them why. It's not like, hey, we've been so overwhelmed this week because of you guys being home. We're going to go for a walk. Like the communication piece is the essential component. It's not actually the action. Like we want to go for the walk. We calmly explain it to them and they're good with it. If we like put some blame on them that it's their fault that we haven't had this, that's where we start to walk on glass a little bit with family. So just to take a deep breath and just have some clear communication.
And really, I think the magic starts with taking the time to establish your core values, because then whatever comes up for our family, we use the core values as a filter. So some of ours are being thankful, being genuine, being adventurous, wanting to be together, and personal development. Like whenever we have something come up that we need to make a decision about, or if things are off in the family, we go back to the core values. We're being invited to this event. Does this fit with our core values? Like, what is the opportunity cost, or whatever the case may be? So once you have those core values established and they're like written down and you're starting to live by them, you will start to make choices that align with them. And over time, I mean, this is not something that's like an overnight, oh, we made the values, now we're good. You have to constantly refer back to them. And the really cool thing at the beginning of our family meeting, everybody goes around and says how they embodied a value. So everyone has buy-in. Hey, I went on an extra walk this week. I was being adventurous. Or, hey, when I was in a fight with my brother, I didn't blame him. I was accountable, which is one of our values. So you start to become that thing that you want to be. So the values are almost like this goal in the future that you just slowly walk towards.
Yeah, that's what we talk about when you go hiking. It's one step in front of the other. You can only do one at a time. You're not going to get to the top by leaping there. And that's the same way with your family. It's one day. Sometimes it's one decision or conversation at a time. Now, looking at your website, we're going to send people there in just a second. First of all, I didn't realize you had 3 boys. So God bless you for raising 3 boys. And I love that they're in shorts in Colorado. This is my kind of people, on your site. So send us to where we need to go and tell us what we're going to find when we get there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're over at strongfamilyproject.com. We talked about some of the steps of the path. We have a free PDF over there, which download all the steps. We actually have nothing to sell on the website. It's all just content for families so they can live more intentional. You will see our notes on it. You'll see how we decided our core values. We even give you a sample list of core values to get you started with, because we think that's the most important place to start. And I appreciate your note about the kids in shorts. That's been a bone of contention over the years. When we lived in a different state, they actually were forced to bring pants to school because the teachers thought that they couldn't go outside in shorts in certain weather. These kids just run hot. Like the littlest one especially, he's sweating bullets. I'm like, I'm not one of those people who say, hey, you got to wear a coat. Like, you go outside without a coat, then you'll learn your lesson and choose to wear a coat. That's just dangerous. And they genuinely just enjoy wearing shorts all the time. Mel had that interaction.
Yeah, I mean, they do really like wearing shorts, and I think what it really is if they're cold, they're going to learn the hard way. If I force them to wear a jacket, it's not going to help. It's like, okay, go to school without one, and if you're cold, you'll learn the hard way, and you'll make the decision next time to bring a coat. So we try to empower them to become their own problem solvers.
But big shorts wearers.
Yeah.
Man, just go with what you got. Somewhere along the way, someone said, "I'm going to add length to my shorts because they were cold." And you'll figure it out. If you don't,
Yeah.
we're from Iowa, and we're shocked at the temperatures here in Indiana that they'll keep kids inside for recess. You're like, "Are you serious? Just get them out. They need to get outside. They need to go burn some energy." The teacher's better if they go outside. They'll be cold. Wear a jacket, snow boots, whatever. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, they're cold, walk faster.
They'll figure it out. Well, our littlest one, just as a little side note, I offer him a jacket because in the morning it's like 45 and then it gets to be like 80 by noon. But he's like, no, I'll never wear a jacket. Like, he feels tougher and he loves having that control. And I let him have it. Fine.
Oh, little Braveheart thing going. Good.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, Mel, appreciate you guys being on the podcast. We'll put the links in the show notes so they can see where they go. You got social media, you got a podcast yourself, all those things. So thank you for making time today.
We loved it. Your superb interview. Love the prayer to set the focus at the beginning. I appreciate all those things. So I love the care that you're putting into your community. Really respect that. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank Joe and Mel for taking time being on today's podcast episode. If you look in the show notes, you will see the link to their website, strongfamilyproject.com. You can see those young men in shorts, which I appreciate. Well, there's an old guy in shorts, too. I just realized the dad's wearing shorts. Anyhow, you can go through it and you can click on some of the things they got there. Begin your path for free. I haven't began my path. But letting you see, like, okay, what does this look like? And, I appreciate them doing this together because, man, my wife and I seemingly work well together. We've done a lot of things in ministry together. But when you're putting yourself out there for other people to digest your content, conversation, or try to equip them in some way, there's just a different level of pressure. And believe me, Satan will do all he can to attack your family and disrupt you. And I'm sure there's days that Joe and Mel are thinking, what are we doing? If they could see us now, what are we doing? We've talked about that within our own home. There's days I do better at pursuing manliness, and there's days that I'm like, you know what, you're a tool, all right? But overall, you say, no, that's where we're going. That's what we're doing. I told my wife, like we do the social media, the social media that takes me the longest is the Pursue Marriage. As we talk about it, she'll send me like, here's a thought, here's a question, here's a, back and forth. But to me, I was like, just because there's a female component to it. And so when you add in this idea that you want men and women, ideally, to digest your content, and you love it to work for another group, their children, there's a lot of pressure. So when you think about it, pray for them. Check out their website, strongfamilyproject.com. And another website you should check out, thepursuitofmanliness.com. You can find this podcast there. You can find the bonus content for the herd. Man, thanks for listening. Let's keep pursuing biblical manliness.